I'm Dane Rosen. The first thing I want to say is that this is a cultural diagnosis, and obviously we experience the cult or culture through specific individual interactions. The cult lives in the microcosm of the individual. And secondly, that this would typically take place in therapy. So this is open heart therapy, so to speak, or open community therapy. And this is not without, some risk, because we are in a psychologically illiterate cult, which means we don't know how to love large portions of ourself. A psychologically literate cult is both aware of the self and able to love it, and we don't know how. And so, by extension, I don't know how to love large portions of the inner and outer psyche, and Fred Burks does not know how to love large portions of the inner and outer psyche. And the benefit of transparency in an individual for individuals is that you get to see into the cult. And Fred is particularly immune. I would consider that a strength in this, for this purpose, is particularly immune to impact. And so, as I explained, there's both a sense of being incredibly invisible that I feel around Fred, meaning I have a sense that in feminine terrain, that I could set a bomb off and he'd be sipping tea. It's like how to show up in Fred's world in a way that is real. So it's particularly good for demonstrating the systemic pathological chauvinism of our cult. So let's first look at impact. Because at this level, at the meta level, this is all very interesting. But at the personal level of the wound, meaning the sexually abused, shamed, humiliated and excluded male in our cult is one of the most damaged, hurt, unloved, and thus dangerous entities in our cult. So the degree of chauvinistic illiteracy, the degree of shame, the degree of self-hatred, the degree of hurt in men in this cult who are sexually abused, shamed, and ostracized is very high. And we can see that in the statistics of the children that we choose to execute or murder, depending on how you call it. So in the United States, we kill young men under the age of 18 for committing certain crimes. And so obviously a high sociopathic threshold. The brain has not fully formed, and people are not born criminals. People are born with a set of human needs, and the environment, to a large extent, determines. The environment, to a large extent, determines how the innate human needs will be best fulfilled. So in a sociopathic environment, the best way to meet your needs for survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, a sense of control and agency that you matter. In a sociopathic environment, the best way to meet your needs is sociopathically. In an empathic environment, all you have to do is scream and your response, there's attendance and response. And so when we have that science, it takes a certain amount of cruelty to decide that rather than to murder the culture, because if you've raised, even before the brain has fully developed at age 25, if you have raised a reptilian brain by bombarding the individual with sociopathic stimuli, which is what activates the reptilian brain, if the outcome is so heinous that something has to be put to death or something has to change, you would think we could change the cult. And if not, murder the people who raised a sociopath as being unfit to influence the next generation. It's of course very difficult. It's a slippery slope because by the time you've killed off X number of people who raised the reptilian brain that we decide in our criminal justice system, justice is supposed to be balanced, but the cult is never put on trial, so it is imbalanced in the justice of the scientific equation of who is responsible for raping 10 women and blah, blah, blah. Is it the cult that failed to spend an hour of emotional literacy? I mean, how sick do you have to be as a cult to take millions of young men and say, we're going to prepare you for the world without a single hour of scientific emotional training? That's how dumb we are. And then, okay, so now you have 1 million shamed, emotionally illiterate men. How many of those are going to be emotionally illiterate? How many of them are going to fight their way through the system and come out healthy despite the system? And how many are going to be emotionally illiterate as they have been indoctrinated to be? Well, and how many of those emotionally illiterate people are going to do something dumb? It's a roll of the dice. And so, why not put that on trial? Why not every time we have a crime, put the cult on trial? Let's gather all the influences. Okay, so you were his principal. It never occurred to you to teach anything about rape in the school? It never occurred to you to teach that men are sensitive human beings in your school? Okay. Guilty. You're the parents. You left them alone with video games while you had constant fights. It never occurred to you that this would traumatize your child? Guilty. You're the parents of the parents. It never occurred to you that calling your pathological abuse cycle love might confuse your children who are now the parents of this boy? Fucking guilty. And it never occurred to you, employer of this individual, that defining professionalism is keep your personal stuff at home, when home is a sicko place that you didn't bother to understand. It never occurred to you that you were asking a sick individual in a sick cult to stay silent about the sick bullshit that was going on everywhere in their life. And you asked them to shut up about it and believe that them making bits of paper for you was more important than their soul. Guilty. We have a sociopathic cult that not everyone can escape. We should be apologizing to the people who can't quite figure out how to evade all of the stupidity and obstacle courses that we set up for them. It's like, we're going to set up 1,000 traps, and then we're going to kill you when you don't escape every single one. So in one of the studies of the juvenile boys who we are going to murder for a year, 50%, no, more than 50% of them had been sexually abused by an older man. Now, that's not proof, but it is suggestive. It is suggestive that more than 50% of the boys that we blame for our stupidity are murdered as children with undeveloped brains, that these boys have been sexually abused by an older man. It suggests that this is a particularly difficult obstacle that we throw at our young men. First, we're going to make you emotionally illiterate. Then we're going to shame you for having emotions. Then we're going to lie to you and tell you that men are not emotional and don't like talking about their feelings. So we're going to shame you for talking about feelings and being emotional. And then we're going to lie to you and tell you that men don't like talking about their feelings and emotions. And then we are going to blame you when you fit into our mold and become more sociopathic by our projection. We're going to treat you as if you're sociopathic, and then when you become more sociopathic, we're going to complain about it. And then we're going to shame you for being homosexual. We'll just play you the run of the last 100 years of movies, and if you don't feel that there is something wrong with you for loving another human being, well, we'll tease you in school, we'll humiliate you, we'll do this. Okay, so we've got the scene set for a tragedy, don't we? Complete blindness and stupidity, shame, ignorance, betrayal, more shame. And if you're young and you spend time with girls, oh, let's tease you for not being very, not being very manly, right? You're spending time with girls. So we'll tease you for spending time with girls if you're a boy. And if you spend time with men as a sociopath, we'll let it pass. But if you spend time with men with tenderness, with sensitivity, we'll tease you even more for that. Meaning we will humiliate you. We will train other sociopaths in the cult to sense out who is being emotional, who is being feminine in any way whatsoever. And then you'll all find each other, and you'll walk behind in the pathological torture cell that is high school. You'll walk behind other people, ganging up, to make sure that they understand that sensitivity and emotionality is not welcomed in our cult, that you will be humiliated for it. Okay, so have we set up enough barriers yet for every young male to fail to be a healthy, empathic human being? Not quite. Not quite. Let's add a little bit of physical violence. Let's have some messages of worthlessness. The parents' needs are very important. Your needs are nothing. I get to shout and bully and hit you. I'm the bigger one, but you don't get to shout, bully, and hit me. Let's communicate a little bit more worthlessness. Okay, so the stage is set. When one of these boys receives a semblance of fathering, a seduction of fathering, meaning there's some kinder, older man in this sociopathic environment that takes an interest in them and that does not hurt them in order to draw them in, so that the older man can sexually abuse and gratify himself and give the child a secret. Give the child a secret that they cannot share without shame. These young men go nuts and start doing their best to alert the cult of its disease and to give back the hostility and hatred that was so meticulously wrapped up and given to them. They can't deal with it. An emotionally illiterate, shame-based, humiliated and isolated young man cannot deal with the pathological cruelty of an older man offering some sense of tenderness in exchange for carrying the shame, the taboo, and the message, my needs to sexually gratify myself, in a way that's going to set you up to be more isolated, more humiliated for life in an abuse cult. You see, because we are not only highly abusive, but we do not receive a single hour in high school or college about how to respond to abuse. So we are going to abuse you, but we're not going to tell you how to repair the abuse. Well, no one else got that lesson either. So if you are abused, meaning if you raise your hand in any circle in America and say, I feel small, I feel helpless, I feel rage, I feel confused, I do not know what to do, an older man who was the only person who was nice to me in some way raped me, used me for sexual gratification, and I don't know what to do with that. I didn't like it. It didn't feel good. I feel hurt, and I don't know what to do with this. We are systematically illiterate on how to love that man, to love that boy. The gossip, the incompetency, the shame that our stupidity, meaning we know this goes on, but we don't think it's valuable enough. We don't think he's valuable enough to prepare our high school students for how to help him. It would be as if we've been breaking bones for thousands of years, but we decided in our infinite cruelty to not train a single doctor. We're just not going to teach people how to repair bones. And so when this comes up, we're going to make it worse. And then when you get mad about that, we're going to isolate you. We're going to isolate you because we don't want to deal with it. So this is the terrain that we're dealing with around the sexual abuse of older men with younger men. Now, if you are culturally illiterate, if you're a trained moron, you don't know how to deal with this. You can't filter for its impact. You have no idea how to respond. And so you do the cult default, which does not work. And so here we have a younger man reaching out to an older man who has some degree of leadership status socially and in community, and alerting him that this has gone on in his community, in his school, in my school, that another older man sexually abused a younger man under the influence of psychedelics for money, meaning was professionally paid and walked away. So an educated human being understands that we're in peak danger territory here. An educated man understands that this is a big deal. That this is the kind of terrain that, with the amount of stupidity, cruelty, and emotional illiteracy in our cult, leads to the most violent crimes as a coping mechanism for not knowing how to deal with this. So this would attend to sensitivity. In other words, if someone was medically literate and someone comes in with 3 arms, two arms amputated, a bleeding thing, a crushed thing, you don't say, make an appointment, let's see you in 2 weeks. A knowledgeable medical professional responds immediately. And, of course, we're not quite as cruel in our hospital, because in chauvinism, the outer body is more valuable than the inner body, because the outer body is the masculine expression. It's real. The inner body, the feelings, the thoughts, is the feminine expression. So it's, of course, not real. We do not have emergency rooms, for example, for the inner body. We don't have competent intake forms for the inner body, which ensures, more blindness, etc. And we do not have statistical information. We don't even have oversight. So Fred Burks, he's just decided he's going to coach in this terrain. There's no form where his clients can learn from me the various ways that Fred is incompetent, or vice versa. There's no forms about that. And so we have systemic blindness. We as an individual, client or observer, don't have the information to know what we don't know. We don't even know what we don't know. And of the things that we don't know, we don't know which things are loud and critical and which things are nothing. We are systemically blind in this terrain. Nobody told me that more than 50% of the juveniles that we put to death, that we murder for our crimes, were sexually abused by an older man. It might have led to some pause. So this is the terrain that we're in. And so I share a little bit of context in an otherwise illiterate cult because it helps to understand the human heart is a thermometer, and it communicates through biology. And then one seeks thoughts. Well, it's a two-way street. It's an integrated system, heart, mind, and body. But Your heart, among other things, tells you whether something's on track or whether it's not. And, in a chauvinistic cult, when you get sad, you blame the thermometer. So, in a chauvinistic cult, your girlfriend doesn't call you, your girlfriend cheats on you with your best friend. You feel very, very sad and feel very small. And one admonishes the thermometer to heat up anyway, right? It's very cold. It's very sociopathic as a temperature, as an environment. But just read a high rating anyway. Pop some pills to push the thermometer up. In a competent culture, when the thermometer goes below zero, and you understand that this is dangerous terrain, you raise the temperature and you allow the thermometer to do its thing. So in a competent culture, when you see lots of 8, 9, 10s, lots of 6s, lots of pain, basically, lots of disease emotionally, you understand something's very wrong in the environment, in the interactions that are producing those numbers, and you change the environment. If you look at the thermometer and it's below zero, you don't bang the thermometer or put it in your mouth and you put wood on the fire, you light a fire, and you change the dynamic. But as emotionally illiterate imbeciles, we, of course, have no idea about this. And the culture always says the same thing. Be more positive. Be happier. Choose to focus on this and this and this and this. And certainly focus, because, focus is a strategy. Because if you've been raped and you're in an incompetent cult that won't respond to the rape, and the rape is 40 degrees below zero, anytime you put the thermometer, you put your heart into the memory and the awareness of the rape, your well-being will plummet. And what this should alert everyone is that there is a chronic problem in the cult that needs addressing. But if you are in an incompetent cult and buttered toast makes you feel better, then from time to time, so that you don't totally collapse, focus on the enjoyment of eating buttered toast, and then go back to questioning, what the fuck do you do in a chauvinistic cult where you got raped? And so, yes, the thermometer, whatever you focus on, will have a different reading. I woke up alive this morning. That's pretty decent reading, 2 out of 10. It's not a great accomplishment, but that's a good thing. And I've been hurt again by a man in a sociopathic state, highly painful. What do you focus on? It depends what the purpose is. The purpose of this is to learn. So you want to learn about the environment from the instruments that read the environment, in this case, biology, psychology, the human heart. So after this exchange, with Fred, we have 7 out of 10 physical pain. So this is kind of in this area right here. Makes it hard to breathe. So we're going on 24 hours of impact around this. So another exchange ending in dissociation, ending in a lack of support, ending in a harshness that feels painful to the wound, ending in, it's a cold cynicism is, I guess, so I would say ice. So I'm icing the wound of a sociopathic male. relating to another sociopathic male after being abused by another sociopathic male. It's a lot of pain. So we got ice. So 7 out of 10 physical pain. 8 out of 10 loneliness, hurt, and grief. So if we kind of mix that up without parsing them out, we got 8 out of 10 loneliness, hurt, and grief. 8 out of 10 regression. So I feel like I don't want to move, I don't want to live, I don't want to exist. I feel 2 years old. And there's no one out there helping my 2-year-old. You see, I didn't learn as a 2-year-old how to advocate. I learned that if I spoke up, I would be hit. I would be hated for speaking up. So I just get stuck in that place. Because that's what incompetent parents do when their 2-year-old is screaming out for attention. Shut them up, put them in another room. Look at them with impatience, with anger. Shut that baby up. Incompetent youngsters in a chauvinistic abuse cult are going to abuse their babies. We don't give parents a single formal hour of parental training. 8 out of 10 shame, meaning I feel shamed. I feel that all of Fred's inadequacy and cruelty has been given to me to process rather than worked with in any way, meaning Fred has not owned any of his own inadequacy as a human being or as a responder to someone in this state, which is a predictable state. So he's either ignorant or sociopathic or both. An ignorant sociopath will not learn what they are ignorant about because a sociopath is not interested in other people. So 8 out of 10 shame, 8 out of 10 attack, collapse, and hopelessness. So here you have, on the one hand, I am probably louder and, one could say ruder to Fred than any other people than the Human Awareness Institute facilitators, which just did this whole thing on a louder level. So, I'm angry, I'm hurt, but I get this feeling like I don't exist around Fred because he's cheerful and polite and a damned idiot. I'm going to just do whatever I'm going to do. Isn't this wonderful? I mean, I get the sense around Fred that he will be waving politely as he drives off a cliff and or sends, a busload of children off a cliff. And he's not going to change it. It's just, that's the way it's going to go. Take care, be well. And so you have a disconnect. You have a high degree of insanity here between impact and affect, so to speak. Cheerfully waving the bus of children over the cliff is kind of the sense. It's like, you fucking moron, wake up. And this is, of course, all taboo. I'm very, very aware that none of this can be said in our cult. This is below the grave. These are the truths that get buried in our cult, so we can't talk about them. But so there's the one thing, there's a certain amount, of just wringing hands kind of thing, energy. And there's a certain sense of rage and attack, but it's balanced and followed by complete collapse and helplessness. Nothing I do can make a difference. So you have both sides. And I am just uncomfortable in both sides, meaning I don't like being that aggressive and that direct and that, quote, rude or insensitive. I mean, I don't want to be stabbed with a red-hot poker, and I don't want to have to call someone a fucking moron and a sociopath for doing it. I don't want the stabbing, and I don't want, I don't know what you do when someone persists in being a moron in profoundly destructive ways while calling it love and health. I don't know what to do with the Human Awareness Institute that's committed to this protocol. I don't know what to do with Fred Burks. I don't know what to do with my parents. I don't know what to do with this fucked up cult. But being polite does not seem to help. And that's sad, because I enjoy courtesy immensely. And it's incredibly sad that our ignorance and our shame reduces our nature to this level. It's very, very sad. So I feel sad 8 out of 10 around that. So this, the collapse and the hopelessness. Then fear of more contact with my culture. So these are high numbers, meaning the decision to try and help Fred understand how he might be abusing someone and understand how he hurt me by hearing about this terrain of miserable abuse. It'd be the equivalent if we understand that this cult values the exterior body and doesn't value the psyche. If you called someone who was a leader in the community and said, my leg is cut off and I'm in the street, and there's a pack of dogs around me that are chewing on the leg that was cut off, and I'm afraid they're going to eat the rest of me. And the wound is infected, and there is no one around. Help me. And I said, that sounds awfully tough, but I've got a yoga appointment. Goodbye. You would have to beat that shithead over the head with a baseball bat a few hundred times. And in our cult, of course, that wouldn't do anything. They would just get mad. Well, what's wrong with me? Why should I be worried about other people? And then you'd have to beat the cult over the head with a baseball bat, and they'd be too dumb to understand what was going on. So this outrage, this violent scream of how can you be so fucked up, does not get heard and empathized with because everyone's fucked up. And so then it comes back to the abuse survivor. I'm fucked up for expecting a fucked up cult to understand what fucked up means. And a fucked up cult doesn't care about its people. A fucked up cult goes to the yoga class and clears the negativity out of their mind and leaves a human being on the street to die because they don't know what they don't know. And in a cult that shames us for not knowing what we don't know, we blame the people who expose us to information we don't know how to deal with. Who do you kill? I mean, this creates murderous rage for me. I understand those young men, by the way. I understand those young men. Picking up an Uzi and mowing down 50 people in this level of frustration and pain feels pretty good. Just shoot the shit out of Fred Burks. Wouldn't it be nice? And his fucking dad for raising him. Wouldn't that be great? Except at the same time, people that are this moronic, how does that help you? If anything, you should pity them. It's just the pity is in the empathic center of the brain that is shut down to manage the amount of pain created by their pathological cruelty. So pity is the intelligent move. I'm sorry you were hurt so much that you can't feel. I'm sorry you were raised to be ignorant about the feminine psyche. I'm sorry You don't understand community responsibility. I'm sorry that you're so disconnected from yourself that conspiracy theories are more fascinating than human beings. I'm sorry that you don't know that rich, fulfilling relationships are the peak of human well-being and the peak for our species probability field, and that you don't get rich and fulfilling relationships when you treat people like shit and don't want to learn. I'm sorry you don't know any of this. That's the logical place to go. But when they've just finished impaling you 30 times with a spear and your reptilian brain has said, ding, 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 sociopath present, shut down the empathic brain, it's too dangerous. You got to get yourself out of their realm. Get the hell out of there. Heal the pain, then we'll let you be a human being again. Well, that's what the reptilian brain is for, is to fight reptiles with sociopathic thinking, which is why we regress into the reptilian brainstem when we are treated with systematic cruelty. And refusing to see and refusing to attune when there is large amounts of pain and significance, not only for oneself, but for large numbers of the community, is about as cruel and sociopathic as it gets. I could do something that could take a few hours of my time, and years of pain for innocent people would go down. It's not really a priority, is it? The amount of stupidity, the amount of pathological hatred that is present in that attitude and behavior is intense. And the trouble is that we teach, in the Pink Floyd song, you got to learn to smile as you stab someone in the back. We teach people to be positive, to have a nice social demeanor as they blow the guts out with machine guns of everyone in their community. And we do not have the eyes in an abuse cult to know the difference. We pick the smiling guy with the machine gun because the machine gun is in feminine terrain and the smile is in masculine terrain. So for a chauvinistic culture, you measure what matters, which is the masculine. You measure the external, you don't measure the internal. And so we have the asymmetry. Our statistics bear out the flaws in these mathematics. It is a mathematical error to take half of the psyche and measure it extensively and not measure the other half at all. You take your tire to a wheel shop and they balance the whole tire. They don't balance half of it. They're not morons in physical terrain. We are morons in psychological terrain because we're dealing with the inner world, we're dealing with the feminine. So I'm afraid, having been reduced to age 2 with grief and pain and anger, etc., and received the fuck you from Fred that if I can't figure out how to teach a moron how to be a human being in 30 minutes, that's all he's got time for. I'm busy depriving my body of food for the next 2 days, What does that have to do with anything? If you're busy doing that, why don't you watch documentaries and learn something when you're starving your body of food? I'm busy doing that. I'm starving you of empathy, I'm starving the community of safety, and I'm starving my body of food. Quite an accomplishment, all in 2 days. So fear of more contact with my culture comes from, I don't know if I can deal with more of that. Because I'm an illiterate American who doesn't know what to do with these things. It's not like I have plenty of sane people to call up and say, oh my gosh, Fred's at it again. He thinks he's a relationship coach. Yeah, I'm at 8 out of 10 shame, and he doesn't even know what he doesn't know, and he's too busy to find out. What a moron. This lifts it off. You don't have to carry the weight. Or if other people were doing their job and reminding Fred, about his stupidity. Yeah, well, if everyone was reminding everyone about these patterns that actually matter and referencing data and doing things about it, and if more importantly we were writing to our governors and our presidents and saying, why the hell do I have to be raised in a sociopathic, emotionally illiterate cult that traumatizes me every single day? Well, then there's no isolation. But I'm in a shadow-averse cult where this is called being negative. And let's look at the bright side, right? Let's make a nice little pithy remark. That's why we all like the talk shows, right? They take pathological cruelty, systemic ignorance, and stupidity and pretend that it's funny while it shoots the fuck out of our future. So I'm afraid. Now, who's the only person I have to kind of turn to around this? My wife. So my need for her goes up 80%. Well, it's not like she has been trained in healthy relational attunement and all that, so she doesn't sense this. One, well, my 2-year-old doesn't like that. Women that know how to tune into a 2-year-old do a better job of raising children. But women who have been abused most of their life tune out of their own inner child in order to avoid feeling horrendously helpless. So they're not very good at attuning to yours. So my 2-year-old isn't happy that my facial expression and stuff isn't just read and magically interpreted. How nice to live in an emotionally intelligent cult. So she doesn't get that, so that's upsetting. Then I ask for help, and she doesn't get how important it is. She doesn't get that I'm 2 years old, etc. And that's upsetting. A 2-year-old wants someone to understand that they're 2 years old and that this is different from an adult, so that's upsetting. And I also know, my rational mind says that it is irrational to expect an abused woman to do something she's not been trained to do, and that she doesn't do that well statistically. Maybe it's 50-50. So here's one of the times where she doesn't do it well. But the complete isolation and helplessness I have that my wife can't be with me in this place means that I flash out with anger. I push her away. So now I've got meditation. But I've also got the shame, wouldn't it be nice for my wife if having issues with people flashing out with her with anger, if I could be calm and be a grown-up man to her in this situation rather than a 2-year-old, which is where we go to when we are pathologically abused by multiple sources in a recurring pattern, and everyone pretends like it's nothing. And so it's if you have your arm broken regularly with a hammer every week, and you say, I'm not even sure for the rest of this lifetime that this will recover from, and someone gets out a hammer and snaps it again. And then everyone says, I've got things to do. You're never going to have a healthy arm. And if we do that systemically to 300 million people, where we reduce everyone by one arm, the amount of lost productivity, the amount of lost capital and well-being, the amount of lost health, the amount of increased trauma is a crime that is unimaginable. To reduce a culture to that level, we are doing that systematically with our cult denial and our traumatic illiteracy. And it is system-wide. Not 1 out of 40 healers introduced me to the concept of trauma, which meant that $140,000 later of largely incompetent therapy was remedied by one stranger in one cafe who in one afternoon told me more about trauma than I had learned from the professional community in 30 years. One. And just as importantly, recommended a book that I read that afternoon and had a breakthrough. Strangers in cafes, folks. The law of chance. Hang out around enough in an idiotic cult around uneducated people, and sometime before you die, you may just get a few nuggets of something from just by sheer random chance. So I've angered at my wife for not knowing the urgency or how to respond, which she of course takes personally. She doesn't say, "You're right. Of course you're upset about all this, blah, blah, blah. Tell me all about it. You're right." She takes personally. It's like, "Oh, what did I do to," and so off she goes. So now she's in her wound. I'm in my wound. The rest of the cult is in their wound. Fred's blissfully enjoying his ignorance and passing on, that to other people as a professional coach. And we've got, the tragedy of our culture continues. Now, I feel 10 out of 10 invisibility, hurt and small. And one of the physical symptoms, I woke up kind of just clenching my teeth. So clenching my teeth is a symptom of kind of stress and grief management that, happens rarely. So one interaction with Fred has trained me about the absolute stupidity of asking another American male to actually do something as an adult to help the very things that he claims to be passionate about, and this, that, and the other. So this is how a cult trains its individuals to be silent. You expose your soul, you ask for help, you ask for leadership, you ask for adulthood, and instead are rejected, ignored, minimized, lied to. When someone says that finishing their Big Mac is more important than calling the ambulance or preventing the next multi-car pile-up accident, that is a lie. That is a moron committed to a level of cruelty or ignorance that has nothing to do with our nature. Now, with the amount of pathological cruelty we dump on people, there are highly sadistic, enraged people. This is how you create them, by the way. How you create highly sadistic, enraged people is every time they ask for urgent attention around anything important, you ignore them and shame them and hate them and then humiliate them. And pretty soon they'll get out a gun and shoot you with great pleasure. Because the planet is better off when there are fewer sociopaths around. And so it's kind of like a self-elimination process. getting rid of a destructive virus, so that other healthier viruses can take its place. It's very, human beings are unusual at the amount of pain. We have suicidal levels in pain, and suicide is, of course, on the upswing. So we have all of this kind of going on. So these are the impact of this. Now, why on earth would I want to pick up the phone to the next American who's less competent at communicating? Why on earth would I want to do that? And we don't. 9 out of 10 rape victims in the United States do not report the rape to the police. Because the police, as a general rule, are going to even be more fucked up than Fred Burks. So why would you expose yourself to that degree of inhumanity? And yet the alternative is isolation, which is even worse. So we're going to put you into the worst wound of your life, and then we're going to give you a rock or a bed of nails. And you can decide, because that's what an abuse cult makes available. You can decide between a rock and a bed of nails. Or you can go back to the therapeutic community, which is the very group of professionals who have systematically betrayed you by not teaching you about trauma, or have sexually abused you, or have covered it up, or have encouraged you to become more sociopathic yourself. 3 therapists have encouraged me to move on and allow the Human Awareness Institute to abuse other people and shame other people and not protect them. So my therapists in my cult heal someone by teaching them how to be a sociopath, by teaching me how to be a Fred Burks, rather than teaching me to be a hero, teaching me to fight for the next innocent victim. I am enraged at paying money to learn cowardice and stupidity. The data does not support 3 incompetent therapists, and I should pay for that bullshit? I mean, it's just insult to injury. So this is the impact and a little bit of the context. So what's Fred doing? What are his programs that are having this effect? So first of all, my needs are more important than yours in 10 out of terrain. So we have sociopathic, thing. Now, what's healthy? What's healthy? Well, what's healthy is called the law of empathy. Now, the law of empathy says that if all I have to do is raise a finger and your life gets 50% better, and it just takes a second of my time, if I don't raise a finger, what does that mean? One of the things it means is that I want to hurt you. Another thing it might mean is you don't really exist for me. Another thing it might mean is I'm an idiot. I don't make the connection. I told you this is the connection, but I don't make the connection. What it doesn't mean is I'm informed and I'm empathetic and you matter. If I can raise a finger and your life gets 50% better and I don't do that, there is something cruel and ignorant about me that maybe I do understand and maybe I don't, maybe it's conscious, maybe it's not, but it is cruel and it is ignorant. Because the whole game on the planet is to create as much well-being as possible, sustainably, for as little impact as possible. And abuse prevention is selling for pennies on the dollar. You can prevent sexual abuse for 1 cent of every dollar that's spent repairing the damage of sexual abuse. So you're pretty moronic or sociopathic if you won't spend the penny. Fred won't spend the penny. My needs are more important than yours in 10 out of 10 terrain. So I understand that this is the biggest emotional thing, or I'm not even going to get that big. I'm not going to learn about this. I'm not going to see you. So I'm not going to understand that this is the biggest pain. And I'm not going to educate myself that I would guess, meaning anyone who had studied this terrain would know this. But I'm not going to study the terrain. I'm a sociopath. I'm a reptile. I don't give a damn about the psyche. Those books are too complicated. So my needs are more important than yours in 10 out of 10 terrain. My needs are more important than the next victim's, or the victim after that. My need to stay silent and stay on track, to fast and whatever it is, that's what mine is. I will hear what I want and do no more. So we have another sociopathic message. So if you look at what Fred hears and doesn't hear in the email, there's no change. There's no change other than here you can read more of my stuff. But I'm not going to hear any of the data. I'm not going to read the book, so I'm not going to hear it that way. I'm not going to watch your videos. I'm not going to hear it that way. I'm not going to listen to you and make time. And I'm not going to hear what you have to say. So I'm not going to hear anything more than I want to hear. My orientation to reality ignores the data. So we've got an insanity. And this, of course, is a mirror of cult insanity. Our culture has been ignoring sexual abuse and traumatic literature for hundreds of years. We are committed as a cult to pathological cruelty and ignorance in this domain. So Fred's just a good representation of our culture and our government. My needs are more important than the next victim of sexual abuse. This is incredibly sociopathic. And it's also insanity, because I don't actually think Fred is a particularly bad human being. And I don't think he's particularly unhealthy. And that's saying a lot about our cult. So if he's not particularly unhealthy, but is producing sociopathic, 8 out of 10 negative impact while being helpful to a sexual abuse survivor, it's speaking to the dangers involved in our cult. And these dangers will and do result. They have resulted, they do result, and they will result in systematic, predictable violence. Crime, shootings, rapes, screaming, whatever, car crashes. This is absolutely predictable. In fact, it's probably what's beneath most of the violence and death in our cult today, whether it's killing ourselves slowly with obesity or any number of things. So my needs are more important than the next victim. And this is very interesting, and I pointed out to Fred that the mathematics in his argument are absurd. Because I don't think that if Fred saw a man raping a woman, particularly if the man was unarmed and the woman was crying for help, I don't think Fred would walk to the other side and say, sorry, I've got 30 minutes right now, and then I've got to fast. So we are often more intelligent when we have visceral impact and proximity. But Fred recluses himself in a variety of ways. It takes a little bit more sophistication to understand that to prevent a school from sexually abusing its students and sexually abusing each other, that the students at high abuse each other and the school abuses the students, and we're talking about thousands upon thousands of people. if you looked at it from a moral equation, are you more intelligent to stop the rape going on in front of you, or to stop 100 rapes from occurring tomorrow? So that's your moral dilemma. What are you going to pick? You press button A, you stop the rape in front of you. You press button B, you stop 100 rapes tomorrow. I would stop the 100 rapes tomorrow. And I would explain it to the victim, and I would expect her to hate me, meaning the one that I didn't intervene so that I could save 100. I would expect her to hate me, and I would also expect her to understand and do the same thing. Not understand emotionally, because you cannot understand the pathological cruelty. Meaning, no amount of statistical data about the abuse patterns of the high facilitators and their, how abused they must have been in childhood lets me forgive them for not showing up when I melted down due to their systemic chauvinism and sociopathic cruelty. It doesn't. That's the part in me that, if dishonored further, could pick up a gun and mow those fuckers down. I understand biologically that when someone is willing to systemically cause that amount of pain with that amount of willful blindness, that just to survive, there is a biological instinct to kill them so that the threat is reduced, one, but also so that you can exist, because behind the wound in so many of the areas, with the parents, with the school, with the facilitators and Fred Burks, behind the wound is a sense of not mattering, not valuing, being insignificant. And one of the things that killing someone does is all those go up. I'm pretty significant. I killed him. I'm safe. They're dead. And I matter. And they don't. So when you're in pathological extreme levels of pain, and you have the feeling of complete invisibility, which I've had my entire life in this cult, in this terrain. You see, in an abuse cult, what you do when you want to defend an abuse pattern is you scapegoat a part of the psyche, and then you attack and make that part of the psyche invisible in everyone in the cult. Now that that part of the psyche is invisible, that part of the psyche feels invisible, feels hurt, feels insignificant, feels rage, screams, tries to get attention because it is being pathologically ignored. And what happens in an abuse cult is that the more that part of the psyche says, hey, you've left me behind, cult. Let me be included. The cult responds by pathologizing. Oh, you're just trying to get attention. Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get attention in a pathological abuse cult that is absolutely committed to not seeing this part of itself, this part of me, this part of you, this part of anyone else. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to draw attention to that. Yeah, but you're just attention seeking. Hello? Anyone in there, you fucking morons? Who said attention seeking is bad? It's the nature of a wound to seek attention. And I'm not the one stabbing the knife in. I'm the one pointing out it's a bad idea. So yes, I want attention, you fucking morons. Pay attention to the pain caused in this domain, and don't punish the victim. Have a little balls and intelligent and deal with the environment. Have a conversation about how to stop shaming by dumping the inadequacy and ineptitude of a Fred Burks or a high facilitator on to the person that needs help and making them deal with it. How about a little courage, a little maturity? So I will not allow you to change me. You have no impact. Now this is where, Fred has not, in my opinion, done his wound with his father. I don't know exactly what their father dynamic is. I know Fred's father is very proud of Fred, and Fred says he likes his father. Fred also said that his father tried to break his spirit and that he resisted and refused to be broken. Okay, great. If you do have a pathological asshole for a dad, resisting and not being broken, good idea. However, have you grieved the fucking wound of being born into a world where you have to fight for your fucking life to maintain your identity? And what kind of a scar does that leave on you? Well, one of the big scars I see in Fred is no one else matters. And so he has cultivated and curated, this is who I am, this is who I'm going to be, and this is what I'm going to do, and no one's going to interfere. And he's very good at it. It's just when he embodies the abuse cult chauvinism, to ignore this amount of data, to be this idiotic, and say, no matter what, you are not going to change me. That's one level of self-hatred and failure. It's a worse level when he says, I'm a big fan of the Me Too movement and I help people. Hello, Fred. You have not helped me one iota. What is this? Am I not saying me too, that I've been abused by your facilitators? How do you think the Harvey Weinstein women would feel if they came to Fred Burks and said, Fred, Harvey Weinstein is raping me, is bullying me, is groping me, and I feel terrified? Well, I'm sorry, women, I'm not going to tell anyone about this because I'm a relationship coach. I believe in this kind of secrecy and denial, but I support you. But I've got to go fast now, and I'm not going to deal with this. Okay, so how does the next Harvey Weinstein woman feel when she learns that her relationship coach, who's passionate about removing shame, didn't do anything to stop her abuse, or the next person's abuse, or the next? How the fuck does she feel? Well, I'm sure Fred could make her feel as small and insignificant as he makes me feel. With a pathological message that my needs to not be affected by you in any way trump the needs of the community, the needs of the species, and basic common decency. I am not going to ask how I can help. I am not going to ask if you need support. I am not going to be your voice. I am not going to be your champion. I will do nothing. And I'm going to pretend that that's okay, because I'm an asshole who can't grasp what being an asshole is. That's what being an asshole is. To be in the presence of a 10 out of 10 wound that someone by definition needs support with, and to do nothing about it. Pretty good definition to me. Fred, an asshole, committed to being an asshole, and committed to not learning to take responsibility, and committed to confusing other people by teaching them what he knows and doesn't know and calling it love. So we have a little bit of a joke. I don't know how to love, so I will get rid of you. You give data to Fred Burks, so he's loving you in a sacred way, right? Just like I. Peter Sandhill was loving me in a sacred way when he escalated a sexual relationship under the influence of psychedelics. If we could just rid the world of sacred love, we might have a little peace. So Fred's sacred love, get rid of you if I don't know how to love you. I'm not going to take responsibility for my impact. I'm not going to apologize for my impact. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to attune to you. I come first. I'm a chauvinistic male. Go away so I don't have to hear you and don't have to confuse my definition of love, which is to abuse you. I cannot hear your feminine side. This is screaming loud. This is an 8 out of 10 message in all of the most feminine and empathic terrains. And we're not talking about Fred here, by the way. We're talking about an abuse cult that Fred has defaulted to. I want to teach what I will not learn. So there's a number of things here. Besser van der Kolk and all of the leading trauma psychologists understand the root cause of 80% of our cultural problems, violence, more people incarcerated than any other country, addiction, re-traumatization, reenacting the wound, chauvinism, brutality, suicide. That trauma, that chauvinism, that psychological ignorance and a lack of empathy is at the root cause of military terrorism without regard for the families and human beings involved. 1 million innocent Iraqis dead. I'm sure that's not of Fred's concern either. There's an insanity here, of course, because Fred is raising and preparing sociopaths at a community level so that he can fight them in his need-to-know site when they become national. That doesn't work. If you're a parent who abuses your child and then goes out to fight crime as a police officer, you are insane. You would be far healthier to quit your job fighting crime and stop committing the crime of being an inept, incompetent parent and raise a healthy, empathic human being that knew how to diffuse tension. If you could do that, you'd probably prevent far more crime than you would need to solve, and you could be absolutely assured that in an insane, self-hating, ignorant abuse cult, that they would ignore your intelligence by preventing more crime and wouldn't pay you a dime for it. So in an abuse cult, when you do something intelligent, you get punished for it. And they reward you for pathological stupidity. And, so, I mean, what do you do with this level of stupidity? Laugh at it? Write a play about the tragedy of another generation? I cannot hear your feminine side. I want to teach what I will not learn. Teaching is a masculine posture, so it is higher ranking than learning. What do I mean? If someone says, I'm teaching sexuality and healthy relationships, people say, ooh, wow, that's impressive. And if you say, I'm learning about healthy relationship, big deal. You're learning. Not important. So the student is the feminine position, and in a chauvinistic cult, the teacher gets rank, and the student is lower rank. This is absurd. But one of the things that it produces in a chauvinistic cult is everyone wants to be a teacher, nobody wants to be a student. And I can vouch for this with all of my therapists. The majority of them were terrible students. Now, how do I know this? Because I would often triage therapists and healers. I would do 2 hours with practitioner A, 2 hours with practitioner B, 2 hours with practitioner C, so Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So for several years, I did a variety of triaging with different practitioners. And then, of course, with working with more than 40 practitioners with over $140,000 of work, you would see the blind spots in person A and the strengths in person A, and you'd see the blind spots in person B and the strengths of person B, and the blind spots in person C and the strengths in person C. None of them talked to each other. I talked to all of them. So they didn't know what they didn't know. Obvious. But the question is, how interested in knowing what they didn't know were our American healers in the New Age movement? I would say about 10%. Steve Orsery, bioenergy balancing, has a tremendous amount of bitterness and cynicism around various past community experiences and this and that. And I would see this bitter, angry, cynical persona sitting back. I learned a little bit about where it came from, but I would see this image in my head as I was listening and doing work with him of this, angry, cynical person of tremendous bitterness. And it just seemed to me that if you're spreading love and light and healing, that this part of your personality needs to be integrated, needs to be worked with and acknowledged in some way. Okay, so how receptive is Steve Orsery to dealing with the fact that this part in him is so loud that it's kind of I would say it was the subtext. That all the clearing the biochemistry and this and governing in central meridian and all that was the focus, but then the context was this whole thing there. And Steve Orsery, like Fred, Steve Orsery watched the sexual abuse of Peter Sandhill and the betrayal of the Human Awareness Institute facilitators in slow motion, as I did, because every time I would do a session with him, I would tell him exactly what happened. So he's watching another professional abuse his client. Now, in a healthy, masculine... by the way, ethically, a therapist or a healer has their primary loyalty to the client in psychological work. My job is to advocate for the best thing for you. Period. What else are you paying for? You paying to be betrayed? So this is the thing. So he watches this in slow motion. And at a certain point when the pain really hit, I got mad at him. I said, Steve, I'm regressed. I need help. There are other innocent victims that need support. This must come to light. And I am, of course, hitting the wall of denial, etc. A letter from you, as my therapist, would make a big difference to me and would protect innocent victims. You know what Steve Orsery said? He said, these guys sound really dangerous. So that's his assessment of the Human Awareness Institute. These guys sound really dangerous. He said, I'm scared. I don't want to be in their crosshairs. I'll let you, my regressed client, deal with them alone. You are in their crosshairs, and it doesn't look good for you. I don't want anything to do with this one because I don't want to get hit. This is what we rely on as men to heal pathological abuse in our culture. You think Steve Orsery is going to stand up for an incest survivor? Little 6-year-old girl comes to him, Daddy's raping me. Your daddy's a big guy. I don't want to fight him. Pathological coward. Fred Burks, the guy you want around when your daughter's being raped? Pathological coward. Or like so many of these things, so the facilitators stand by and allow sexual abuse to occur rampantly within high, but then they make money with the therapy. The workshops don't make any money. They make money with the therapy to clean up the messes that their workshops create by bringing emotionally illiterate, shame-based, traumatized people together with no information, calling it love, and when that blows up in their face a third of the time, some of those people go off and kill themselves. Some of those people go off and get addicted. Some of those people go off to repeat the trauma. And some of those people hire the facilitators who patiently listen and offer zero traumatic advice, zero ethical response to the to the abuse that they induced by pretending that the single biggest issue underlying violence and abuse in our culture, which is undealt with unconscious trauma, shame is a subset of trauma. Abuse is a subset of trauma. Chauvinism is a trauma. When you learn that your feminine side, no matter what you do and say, has no value in this cult, and that your masculine side is going to be attacked, but has value. There's trauma, there's shame, there's grief, and we're not going to teach you how to grieve. We're not going to teach you how to grieve. We're not going to teach you what trauma is. We're not going to teach you what abuse is. We're not going to teach you to repair trauma. We're going to set you up to traumatize each other and then charge you money to fix the harm we are complicit in. It'd be the equivalent of a doctor cutting down the signposts along a very dangerous road and bribing an ambulance to stand by. There's going to be a lot of accidents here. I've removed all the sign. Now what I want you to do, listen carefully, is go right to the scene. You just, I built you a little pull-out here. Now you wait there. Okay. Now drive to the scene, and then when you're in an accident, bring them to my office, and I'll make money. Then I want to be praised, right? We got to the accident so fast. Yeah, you were the cause. Of course you did. And we gave them the best treatment at top prices. It was incredible. And, aren't we loving, and this and that and the other? And then we went back to the accident and made sure that when anyone tried to, when other people put up signs because you cut them down, we're gonna shut them down. When High sued me to make sure that fewer people could access the information and didn't tell anyone, that's cutting down the signs. And when the facilitators at the end of every abuse shop say, we're here, when anything goes wrong, which it will because we haven't told you what you need to know, when it goes wrong, we're here, $100 an hour, love to love you, any way we can, unlicensed, don't know what we're doing, but let's see how we can help. So, you know, it's a perfect it's a perfect ecology. What you have to say takes too much time for me to hear. So typical, typical wound in that dynamic. What you have to say is important theoretically. I just don't have time to hear it because you're so valuable that I choose to spend my time elsewhere. And you have more to say because when I'm a chauvinistic asshole, it builds up, so you have more to say. So I have even less time to hear that because I'm a chauvinistic asshole that doesn't want to deal with my stuff. But I don't want to feel like I'm a chauvinistic asshole who doesn't want to deal with my stuff. So please tell me about my shit. Please, anyone, call me out in my shit. Oh, it's going to take some time because I've got a lot of shit. I don't have time. I don't have time. And I love fighting. I love, this was the other last little zinger I'll kind of close with is Fred loves controversy. If you watch Fred in a room with, I can only speak to, the rooms that I've been in, but if Fred is smiling when someone sends a zinger, this or that. He's, ooh, it's like he enjoys combat and war. And he's pretty sociopathic. He's able to gather all this conspiracy, stuff and, doesn't cry about it, doesn't weep about the tremendous horrors in our culture, etc. So, but he claims, I don't have to fight like this with healthy, empathic human beings. I have to fight with an asshole because he refuses to hear. If someone's deaf, you have to scream. So Fred's tone deaf, so you're screaming in his ear, you fucking moron! Pay attention! And he said, oh, I don't like fighting. Off I go. It's wonderful, isn't it? It's like I'm going to be going off in these controversial groups. That's why I don't have any time, right? I'm going to gossip and talk about this and have controversial topics and put together conspiracy websites, but I've got no time to actually listen to my ethical and moral responsibilities as a human being. And if you've got a problem with that, well, I don't want to fight. I'm just a peaceful, loving guy who doesn't want to clean up severe amounts of shame and abuse. So I felt shamed and like shit when Fred betrayed and abandoned and walked away and didn't feel, didn't empathize, didn't intuit, didn't ever clean up his mess till now. It disturbs me that he's in this field with this level of irresponsibility. Disturbs me. Because he's going to pass on his stupidity to his clients the same way that the high facilitators pass on their stupidity, to their clients. The worst thing you can have in this debacle of a culture is abuse repackaged as love without caveat, without empathy, and without attunement, and being given in a cheerful face, which this culture has considered positive, so that you think you're actually getting something good. And then when it doesn't work, because that doesn't work, you feel there's something wrong with you. And that's how this cult gives its shame to you. Cheerful face. We're going to give you $20 trillion in debt. We're going to anger half of the global population through global terrorism. We're going to hack your intellectual property, spy on you, We're going to give that to you and say this. We did this because we loved you. We loved you. And we're your government. We're your parents. We're your cult. We're your friendly therapist. We're your loving high organization committed to love and intimacy you see, just not the dark stuff, because we don't want to deal with it. And we certainly don't want to own and apologize for our impact.